Hello everyone, in this video I will be sharing 8 simple techniques that I personally have used to achieve Band 8 in my IELTS Writing Task 1 General Training. A lot of people think it's very hard to achieve a high band in IELTS writing, but from my personal experience, it's a lot simpler and easier to achieve than you would think because I employ these simple techniques that I will be sharing in today's video. So you just have to practice effectively with these techniques in mind. And without any further ado, let's get to it. Technique number 1 is to master your time management skill and your focus. For time management, I highly recommend putting in 20 minutes on task 1 and 40 minutes on task 2. And for your focus, you have to stay fully focused on the writing task that you are doing. If you're writing task 1, focus only on task 1. If you're writing task 2, focus only on task 2. And in order to achieve this, you have to eliminate distraction. What does that mean? At the beginning of the exam, even if you are able to look at both task 1 prompt and task 2 prompt, I would highly recommend that you do not look at task 2 prompt at all until you finish writing your task 1, so that your brain is fully focused on writing task 1 only, and that you're only looking at task 2 prompt and started writing task 2 after the 20 minutes is over. This way, it helps you ground yourself to focus only on task 1 and writing that task 1 within that 20 minutes time frame. Technique number 2 is to brainstorm your idea before you start writing your essay. But you have to be very quick because you only have 20 minutes to complete task 1 writing. Therefore, you cannot spend 10 minutes brainstorming. So you should spend around 3 minutes only to brainstorm your idea. But I think this first part is very important because if you don't brainstorm and plan your idea ahead of time, your writing is not going to be coherent and it's not going to be well structured. So how do you brainstorm quickly? This leads me to technique number 3, which is to pick something that you have personally experienced to write about. The brainstorming part takes a lot of creativity. When you pick something that you have personally experienced, you don't have to create or come up with ideas. So it would be quicker if you just recollect an event that has already happened. So that's why it's a lot quicker for you to use your personal experience if possible. I'll give you an example. During my task 1 writing, this was my prompt, which is to write a letter to a festival or event manager who is seeking volunteers for this year's event. So basically, I have the freedom to pick any event that I want to talk about. And I think I remember the prompt probably have mentioned an event in your hometown. I can try to be creative and come up with something very unique, very different, but that would take me a lot of time to have to think about something that has never happened before and for me to be creative about it. However, if I just use something that I know, that I'm familiar with, I don't have to spend time and my brain energy. So in this case, I picked the Cambodian New Year Festival. So if you read my essay, this is what I have in my first paragraph. I am writing to express my interest in assisting with the Cambodian New Year Festival 2025 at Oambel High School. The Cambodian New Year Festival is something that's real. It has happened before at Oambel High School. Oambel High School is my old high school, my alma mater. So basically, by picking the event that I'm familiar with as well as the high school that I went to, I don't have to come up with something new. So doing that saves time. And technique number 4 is to answer exactly what the prompt asks. When you do this, your essay looks well structured and well organized. You can directly respond to what's being asked in the prompt. So if you look at my task 1 prompt and my task 1 essay, you'll see that my essay is basically a mirror or the direct answer of what's being asked in the prompt. So let's take a look at that together. Now, here's my task 1 prompt. Here are the 3 points that's being asked in the task 1 prompt. Talk about what you think about last year's event, what you can help with this year, ask some questions to the event manager about this year's event. So if you look at the second paragraph in my essay, that was a direct answer to what I thought about last year's event. If you look at my third paragraph, I talked about how I can help with in this year's event. I talked about basically how I could help designing of the flyers, how I could help with organizing the food booths. And then if you look at my fourth paragraph, I asked some questions to the event managers as being requested by the prompt. So basically, it didn't take me a lot of time to come up with what to write because I follow exactly what's being asked in the prompt. So yeah, read your prompt carefully and answer exactly what the prompt asks you to write about. And tip number 5 is to respond in moderation. What does this mean? It means don't overwrite a single point that you don't have enough time to write other points. Let's use my essay as an example again. As being discussed previously, my second, third, and fourth paragraph are the direct response to the prompt, right? If you look at each of those paragraphs, none of them is being overwritten, which means I did not spend a lot of time in one single point and overwrite it. Let's use that second paragraph as an example. Second paragraph is a response to what you think about last year's events. And in responding to that, I wrote, last year's celebration overall was well organized and successful. In particular, I found the booklet and the volunteer guides to be very helpful in navigating the booths. However, I also took notes of some areas of improvement for this year's celebration. So, in that paragraph, I had 3 sentences that talked about how I think about last year's event. I could be creative and write more about what I think about last year's event, but I know that this is enough for me to respond to the question. And I don't want to spend a lot of time responding to this one particular point that I don't have time to respond to the other 2 points. So that's why I think it's important to manage your writing and respond to the prompt in moderation. Technique number 6 is to determine ahead of time if you're writing a formal letter or an informal letter. In Task 1 General Training, you'll be writing a letter or an email to someone, and it could be either an informal letter or a formal letter. Writing to the president, your school principal, or your professor would require you to write a letter in a formal language. That is very different if you were to write the letter to your friend. So, knowing ahead of time what kind of language you'll be using in the letter would help keep you consistent during your writing, so that the vocabularies as well as the language of the essay reflect the formality of the letter. And technique number 7 is do not count words. I know in the prompt it states how many words you're supposed to write minimum. In this case, 150 words for task 1. I do not recommend counting the number of words during your writing test because this wastes time. When you write your essay in response to the prompt with a good structure and a good amount of sentences in your paragraph, you should automatically know that it should hit the minimum word count. The more you practice, the more you'll be able to tell. When I wrote my essay in the exam, I did not do the word count because I know it definitely exceeded 150 words. Why do I know that? I know that because I had 4 paragraphs in my letter. In each paragraph, I have at least 2 very well written sentences. And from looking at the total amount of words that I have in my writing, I can identify that it's more than 150 words. So I did not have to do a word count in the test. And I definitely do not recommend doing a word count in the test because that time could be spent on writing. My essay turned out to be 235 words. So yeah, do not count words during the test. And technique number 8 is after you finish writing task 1, do not proofread your task 1 essay right away unless you have a lot of time left. The biggest priority in IELTS writing is to finish task 1 and finish task 2. No matter how perfect your task 1 essay could be, if your task 2 essay is not complete, you are not going to get a high band. So that's why it's important to prioritize being able to finish both tasks. If you have a lot of time at the end of task 2, that's when you should come back to task 1 and proofread it and then go back to task 2 and proofread it. However, if you have a lot of time in task 1, let's say you only spend 15 minutes total in task 1 and then you're done, and basically you still have 5 minutes left until you move on to task 2, then in that case it's fine to proofread your essay. In my case, I finished my task 1 at around 19 to 20 minutes mark. So I jumped straight to task 2 without proofreading task 1. And at the end of task 2, when I had about 2 to 3 minutes left, that's when I went back to task 1 and proofread my writing. This technique was really helpful to me, but feel free to navigate your own writing task according to your own preference and style. And this is all I have for today's video. I hope these techniques are helpful to you. If you have any questions, don't forget to leave it in the comment and I'll do my best to answer them. If you like this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It would really help me grow and continue to share language learning tips with you. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell as I have new videos coming up every week. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!